Hey everybody, I thought a good way to understand last homeworks, given all the technical issues, was just to do this with you. So, surprise, here I've just selected Liberia as a country to study, and I'm going to follow the prompts. The first was to look at under 5 mortality rate and to find the worst places in a country. You can do that by looking on the map and just running the cursor over the area, or you can do it by bar, and you can see a correlation between the highest bars and the darkest spots on the map. I've actually been to these places, River G, which is very, very remote, and Grab Cape Mount, also very remote, as they border Ivory Coast and Sierra Leone, respectively. But then look when you change the analysis to number instead of rate, then you basically see that places that have high rates per 1,000 don't necessarily have a lot of people. So places like Monrovia have lots of people, but lower rates. So here, we now can see that we can look at things not only by geography, but can look at places by wealth, as defined by 20% increments from poorest to richest. And then we can see that if you're the poorest by number, at least, you're going to have higher rates, higher total deaths. If you switch by rate, you might have something different. Here is just another way of looking at the same thing. Now going on to frontiers, which is again another magic of the word frontiers. There's really no meaning outside of Equist, but it's just looking at a concept of change versus equity, not numbers versus geography. The first thing I want you to see is that you can look at different places in Liberia by the diseases that are afflicting those areas. And in this case, if you click out, you can isolate. And if you click in, you can add and basically focus on a disease of interest instead of everything all at once. In the frontiers, the key part of this is this idea of if you could bring the population, in the case of wealth, to the highest quintile, the richest. These are the number of amenable deaths, the number of deaths that can be saved if you brought everyone to equal starting points. So it's a very unique idea, not that you're going to do an intervention that saves a number of people in an area, but that you'd bring up the equity of in terms of income of a region, and therefore save deaths. So here in this case, we now move from equity to operational. Now this is interesting. It's basically saying instead of bringing the other locations to the highest places in terms of wealth, you just look at the success of the place that had the highest success, and you say, oh, if we could match that success, then we'd get the same gains in mortality reduction. Okay, so I'm now just about here starting up a case, and we shouldn't have any more issues because we have now the correct URL. So here, you just go through the process, the priorities that we kind of memorized, and we see that we have to pick the population. A lot of us didn't do that in the memo. You got to decide where you're going to put your limited resources. So we're looking at under 5 mortality and deaths per 1,000 children, and we can look at it in different ways. We can either look at rate or the number, and then we can look at this in two ways. We can either look at it in terms of a map. So here's a set of targeted populations, and you can orient either by alphabetical order or by weight of deaths, number of deaths. And you can see Montserrato, which is kind of the capital, has the highest numbers of deaths because it has the most people. And Nimba also been to both these places, and they're not just about deaths, but in this case, we're looking at deaths. Now, you can just rank it out and pick up from here, or you could, again, look at these lines, and it's the same idea that you have number of deaths from high to low, but here in terms of inequity. So these is pretty interesting. You look at the top circles, just total number of deaths. The second one is this equity, that if you could bring everyone in line with the richest regions, and then the bottom, if you could bring everyone in line to the most successful regions, then you can make gains that way. So the first step is to essentially pick the population target, and just click it, and as you click it, you can see that on the right that the colors have changed, and that's because you are now targeting the places that have had the biggest inequities, and towards the whole. If you could click every single region, you'll see that the whole circle is occupied. So here now you have to pick the focus areas. Again, you have to decide not only where you want to go, but you have to decide what you want to do with regards to what disease is, right? You have to choose what disease you want to do. And so in this case, just going to pick the top causes of under 5 mortality, which includes other. And you'd have to look in the details about what actually other is. And then you can see that as you select these particular disease groups, then you can say what proportion of the deaths due to inequity of the largest proportions would be affected by each of those diseases. That's something just to explore and think about, because it's a little bit weird. Not weird. It's just a different analysis. Okay, here we save. In order to go to the next step, you have to save. Again, we decided where we're going to be, what we're going to do. I'm sorry, what diseases we're going to focus on, and now we're going to say what we're going to do. And these are kind of this concept of platforms, but in this case, platforms is, instead of community, we'll say family care. Instead of population, we'll say preventative. Instead of healthcare, I'll say curative. And you can decide what you want to do. Again, you can't do everything. The concept of this was, if you go through all the steps with Equist, in theory, that you could come up with a dollar cost, and about how much your intervention would go, and give you a map along the way. Here we're selecting the type of interventions that we want to do based on malaria and pneumonia and sepsis and the other, and now clicking in response along the platform what interventions should be undertaken. It can seem very arbitrary if you're just going to click. It won't be arbitrary if you decide through problem solution trees what is the actual intervention of interest. The analogy would be like ChatGPT. If you're just going to say do whatever you want, you're going to get crap. But if you are selective in what you say you want done, then you use a tool for the purpose of getting information rendered in a way that's useful, or which can advance an effort. So we have to save what we're going to do. Now we get to this issue of bottlenecks. In advance, for Liberia, UNICEF has already said, hey, these are issues when you do these things about coverage. This is what you can expect in terms of people getting the commodities for sanitation, for water in the home, in terms of availability. The coverage you see is 55%. That means that 55 out of the 100 people targeted for wash and water connection, in terms of availability of that stuff, will actually reach them. That could be due to complex things like it will never come to the country, or it could be stolen in the warehouse. Here you see that sometimes there's just not any data. So then you have to put in a percentage for coverage. Otherwise, you're saying that it's impossible, 0% coverage for your intervention to move through those steps. So here, initial utilization, I didn't think it made sense to have that at 0% because remember, initial utilization is an inherited number from geographical and potential coverage bottlenecks. And the same thing for human resources. I happen to know that the coverage is not 0%. So here now we save it and then move to the next. We just covered this, but now that you've decided, okay, what bottlenecks you're going to look at, what is the coverage for those bottlenecks, now you can decide, okay, I'm going to tackle the causes of those bottlenecks so as to increase the coverage. So your intervention is not only to do the thing that you want to do, like, build the drains or pipe in water, but you have to address what would be those challenges specifically to get in the way of that, such as no one's managing the pipes, or there's no security on the pipes, or the roads are rough. Here, I'm clicking, hey, I want to focus on skill building, and so that's going to increase the coverage for quality. All right. Hopefully that was helpful.